I'll never forget the sound of my mother's laughter in that lawyer's office. It wasn't the polite, uncomfortable chuckle people give at funerals when someone tells an awkward story about the deceased. This was genuine, cackling, cruel laughter, the kind that cuts through you like broken glass. We were all gathered at Peterson and Associates for the reading of my grandmother Eleanor Hartley's will. The office smelled like leather and old paper, with mahogany furniture that looked like it cost more than my annual salary. I sat alone on one side of the room, my handbag clutched in my lap like a shield. On the other side, my parents, Sarah and Robert, who hadn't spoken to me in 4 months. My brother Marcus, 23 and golden as always, scrolling through his phone like this was just another inconvenience in his busy life. My Aunt Linda and Uncle James, Eleanor's other children, whispering to each other and occasionally glancing at me like I was something unpleasant they'd found on their shoe. Mr. Peterson, the lawyer, was a thin man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He'd known my grandmother for decades, handled all her affairs. When our eyes met briefly, I thought I saw something like sympathy there, but it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. "Let's begin," he said, opening a leather portfolio. "The last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Hartley, executed on the 15th of March this year. 3 months before she died." I swallowed hard, fighting the grief that still felt raw and immediate. Gran had been the only person in my family who'd ever truly loved me, who'd raised me from the age of 8 when my parents decided I was too much trouble to keep around. Mr. Peterson's voice was steady, professional. "To my grandson Marcus, I leave my beach house in Cornwall, along with all furnishings and contents therein." Marcus looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised. "I knew that property, a beautiful 3-bedroom cottage overlooking the sea, worth at least £800,000. Marcus nodded, like he'd expected nothing less. "To my daughter Linda, I leave my antique jewelry collection, as detailed in the attached inventory." Aunt Linda actually smiled, her eyes gleaming. That collection was worth at least £200,000. I'd helped Gran catalog it once, spending lazy Sunday afternoons handling Victorian brooches and Art Deco necklaces while she told me the story of each piece. "To my son-in-law James, I leave my vintage car collection, currently housed at the Riverside storage facility." Uncle James grunted in satisfaction. Gran had 5 vintage cars, all meticulously maintained. Another small fortune. "To my daughter Sarah and her husband Robert, I leave my primary residence at 42, Thornbury Lane, along with all furnishings, and the sum of £300,000 from my primary savings account." My mother's expression was calculating. The house was worth £1.2 million, maybe more, plus £300,000 in cash. I watched her lean over to whisper something to my father, probably already planning what they'd do with it all. My chest felt tight. I hadn't expected anything, not really. But sitting there, watching my family divvy up Gran's life like vultures picking at a carcass, made me feel invisible, erased. Then Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "And to my granddaughter Dana." Every eye in the room turned to me. I sat up straighter, my heart hammering. "I leave the sum of $10 with my love." Silence, just for a heartbeat. Then my mother started laughing. It started as a snort, then became this full-throated cackle that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. $10, she gasped between laughs. "Oh my God, $10. Eleanor really knew what you were worth." My father was grinning, shaking his head. "Guess all those years of playing victim didn't pay off after all, did they, Dana?" Marcus looked up from his phone, and I saw the smirk before he even opened his mouth. "That's hilarious. What are you going to buy, Dana?" "A coffee." "Oh, wait, coffees cost more than that now." Aunt Linda and Uncle James weren't cackling like my mother, but they were exchanging amused glances, barely suppressing their own laughter. The humiliation burned through me like acid. My face felt hot, my eyes stinging with tears I absolutely refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of them. $10. After 15 years of living with Gran. 15 years of being the one who visited every week, who helped her with shopping when her arthritis got bad, who sat with her in hospitals and held her hand when she was scared. 15 years of actually loving her while these people only showed up when they needed money or wanted something. And she left me $10. I stood up, My legs shaky, my vision blurred. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't sit in this room full of people who hated me while they laughed at my grandmother's final insult. But then Mr. Peterson spoke, his voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. "Actually," he said, and something in his tone made everyone fall silent. "There's a private letter, sealed, addressed only to Dana, with instructions that it be read aloud only in her presence, but she may choose whether others hear it." The room went dead quiet. Mr. Peterson reached into his portfolio and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, expensive paper. I recognized Gran's handwriting immediately, that elegant script she'd learned in finishing school 70 years ago. "For Dana, the truth you deserve." He held it out to me. My hands were shaking as I took it, feeling the weight of it. Not just a note, a real letter. Everyone was staring at me now, and the laughter had died completely. My mother's face had shifted from amusement to something more guarded. My father was frowning. Whatever was in this letter, Gran had made sure it would be heard. And suddenly I knew. The $10 wasn't an insult. It was a setup. My fingers trembled as I held the envelope. I could feel the weight of everyone's stares, the sudden tension that had replaced the mockery. Mr. Peterson watched me with those calm, professional eyes, but there was something else there now. Anticipation, maybe. Or vindication. "Would you like to read it privately, Dana?" he asked gently. I almost said yes. Almost took the coward's way out, slipped out of this office, and read Gran's final words to me in the safety of my car where no one could see me cry. But then I looked at my mother, at the way her smile had frozen, becoming something brittle and uncertain. At my father, who'd shifted in his seat, suddenly uncomfortable. They'd laughed at me. In front of a lawyer, in front of family, they'd laughed at the idea that I meant so little to the woman who'd raised me. "No," I said, and my voice was stronger than I felt. "If Grandma wanted me to have the choice, then I choose to read it here. Out loud." I broke the seal, my hand still shaking, unfolded the heavy paper, and there, in Gran's elegant handwriting, were words that felt like she was speaking directly to me from beyond the grave. I took a breath and began to read. "My dearest Dana, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've just been humiliated in front of people who never deserved you." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. The $10 wasn't an insult, it was a test. I wanted to see if they'd finally show you the cruelty I witnessed for years, but you always made excuses for. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to continue. "When you were 8 years old, your parents dropped you at my doorstep with 2 suitcases and a garbage bag full of toys. Your mother told me you were too difficult. You'd just been diagnosed with dyslexia, you see, and you needed extra help with school. Tutoring, patience, accommodations. They saw it as inconvenient. I remembered that day. Remembered crying, asking why I couldn't go home. Remembered my mother saying, 'You'll be happier here with Grandma. She has more time for you.' They visited you twice that first year," the letter continued. "Once the second year. After that, they only came when they needed money. I kept track, Dana. I documented every phone call where your mother complained about having to pretend to care about that girl. Every holiday where they'd visit me but take Marcus to expensive restaurants while you stayed home. Every birthday they forgot." My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the letter. Across the room, my mother had gone very pale. "Marcus received everything," I read. "Private school tuition, £15,000 a year. University paid in full, £40,000. A car at 17. Spending money, holidays, support. You worked part-time through state school because I was handling you. They told everyone I'd volunteered that we were so close. The truth is they abandoned you and expected me to be grateful for the burden. That's not," my mother started. "Let her finish," Mr. Peterson said sharply. I looked back at the letter, and the words swam through my tears. "I watched them break your heart over and over, sweetheart. Watched you hope and pray that this Christmas would be different, this birthday they'd remember, this visit they'd actually ask about your life. And I watched you make excuses for them because you needed to believe you were loved." A sob escaped my throat. Gran had seen it all. Every time I defended them to her, every time I'd said they're just busy, or Marcus needs them more. She'd known. "So I left you $10 in the will to show you once and for all, what they really are. I needed you to see their true faces, Dana, to hear them laugh at the idea that you mattered. Because until you saw it, really saw it, you'd keep hoping. Keep hurting. The room was absolutely silent now. Even Marcus had put down his phone. You were never the problem, my darling girl. You were brilliant and kind and brave, and they couldn't see it because they never bothered to look. You deserved so much better than what they gave you. You deserved parents who fought for you, who celebrated you, who loved you the way I did. I was crying openly now, tears streaming down my face. But Dana, this letter isn't just about them. It's about you. It's about making sure that you finally understand. You are worthy. You are enough. And you were always, always loved. I took a shuddering breath, ready to fold the letter and leave, but there was one more paragraph. However, there is something else. Mr. Peterson will now explain the actual inheritance. I looked up at the lawyer, confused. He was smiling. Mr. Peterson set down the first folder he'd been reading from and picked up a second one, much thicker, bound with a red ribbon. Mrs. Hartley's will, he said, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone sit up straighter, contained two parts. The first part, which I just read, was what she termed the public will, designed to be read in front of the entire family. He untied the ribbon, and I watched pages of legal documents spill across his desk. The second part is the private trust, established 15 years ago, shortly after Dana came to live with her. 15 years ago, right when my parents had dumped me at Grant's house and never looked back. Mr. Peterson looked directly at me, and there was something in his expression now, respect, maybe, or vindication. Eleanor Hartley acquired significant property assets over the past 4 decades. What your family doesn't know is that the house they just inherited, the main house worth £1.2 million, that's actually the smallest of her properties. My mother's head snapped up. What? Eleanor owned 17 rental properties across London and Manchester, Mr. Peterson continued, his voice calm and precise. A commercial building in Birmingham, currently housing 6 businesses, and a diverse portfolio of investments that she managed very carefully and very quietly for the past 40 years. I couldn't breathe. 17 properties. The total value of her actual estate, Mr. Peterson said, is approximately £8.7 million. The room exploded. My mother was on her feet, shouting, "That's impossible! She lived in that tiny house. She drove a 15-year-old car. She complained about money constantly. Mrs. Hartley lived modestly by choice," Mr. Peterson said, his voice cutting through the chaos. She believed in building wealth quietly and leaving it to someone who would use it wisely. He turned back to me, and I felt like I was floating somewhere outside my body, watching this happen to someone else. The trust stipulates that Dana receives the entire property portfolio, the commercial building, and 85% of the investment accounts. The remaining 15% of liquid assets will be used to establish a literacy charity in Eleanor's name, which Dana will oversee. £8.7 million. I couldn't process it. My grandmother, who I'd thought was scraping by on a pension and maybe some rent from a couple of flats, had been secretly wealthy. And she'd left it all to me. Eleanor made me promise to structure this revelation exactly this way, Mr. Peterson continued, and now he was looking at my parents with something like contempt. She wanted your family to show their true colors first, before Dana discovered that she'd inherited everything that actually matters. My father found his voice, standing up so fast his chair nearly toppled. This is fraud. She was clearly manipulated. Mrs. Hartley had a full mental competency evaluation done 6 months ago, Mr. Peterson interrupted smoothly. She scored perfectly. She anticipated accusations of undue influence. So she also left video testimony explaining her reasoning in detail, which I'm prepared to show in court if anyone contests this will. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. She also had 3 separate lawyers review the trust for any potential legal challenges. She consulted with a forensic accountant to ensure everything was properly documented. She was very thorough. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew exactly what you'd do when you found out. Aunt Linda was crying, actual tears this time, not performative ones. My mother cut me out. Her own daughter. How could she do this? You visited her twice in the last 5 years, Mr. Peterson said flatly. Both times to ask for money. Once for your husband's business, once for your daughter's wedding. Eleanor gave you £50,000 total. You never paid any of it back. Uncle James was trying to do math out loud, his face red. 17 properties, at least £500,000 per property on average. She should have split it among all the grandchildren. This isn't right. Dana was the only grandchild who visited regularly, Mr. Peterson said. The only one who called just to talk. The only one who cared whether Eleanor was lonely or sick or needed help. The only one who loved her without wanting something in return. He looked at me, and his expression softened. Your grandmother wanted you to have security, freedom, the ability to build a life without depending on people who've proven they can't be depended on. I was still trying to process it all. The properties, the money, the fact that Gran had been planning this for 15 years, quietly building an empire to leave to the granddaughter everyone else had thrown away. And then my mother spoke, her voice shaking with rage. You manipulative little bitch. Everyone turned to stare at her. You poisoned her against us, she hissed, her face twisted with fury. You lied about us. You manipulated a lonely old woman who didn't know any better. We're your parents. How dare you? Mrs. Hartley, Mr. Peterson said, his voice ice cold. I'm going to stop you right there. Because everything you're about to say, Eleanor predicted it, word for word, which is why she made the video. He looked at me. Dana, you have the right to decide whether or not we watch it now, or if you prefer to leave and... Play it, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like someone stronger, someone who'd finally had enough. If Grandma wanted them to hear it, then they're going to hear it. Mr. Peterson pulled a laptop from his desk drawer and set up a small projector. The screen descended from the ceiling. Apparently Peterson and associates was prepared for exactly this kind of situation. My father was still sputtering. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us. By stealing our inheritance. Marcus looked genuinely confused rather than angry. Mum, Dad, calm down. Maybe Grandma just... Shut up, Marcus, my mother snapped, whirling on him. You don't understand what she's done. But I hadn't done anything. That was what they couldn't seem to grasp. I just existed. Just loved my grandmother and been loved in return. The screen flickered to life, and there she was. Gran. My breath caught in my throat. She looked so frail. This must have been recorded for, maybe 5 months ago, when the cancer had really taken hold. She was sitting in her favorite chair, the green velvet one by the window where she liked to read. Someone had helped her dress nicely, a blue cardigan I recognized, her hair styled the way she always wore it. But her eyes, God, her eyes were sharp and clear and full of fierce determination. If you're watching this, she began, and I had to bite my lip to keep from sobbing at the sound of her voice, then Dana has just inherited my estate, and I imagine some of you are quite upset about it. She looked directly into the camera, and it was like she was looking right through the screen at my mother. Sarah, you dropped your daughter at my doorstep when she was 8 years old because she had a learning disability you couldn't be bothered to accommodate. You said, and I quote, we can't handle her. She's too much work. You take her. My mother was shaking, her hands clenched into fists. You visited twice that first year, once the second year. After that, only when you needed money. You told people I was helping out with Dana. The truth is you abandoned her. And when she'd call you, crying, asking when you were coming to visit, you'd make excuses. On screen, Gran picked up a notebook. I recognized it, a leather-bound journal she always kept in her desk drawer. I kept records, she said, holding it up to the camera. Every phone call, every broken promise, every birthday you forgot. November 15th, 2010, Dana turned 9. You didn't call. December 23rd, 2011, you visited for Christmas but told Dana she couldn't come to dinner with you and Marcus because it was just for the boys. April 2nd, 2013, Dana called you crying because she'd been bullied at school. You told her you were too busy and hung up after 90 seconds. Each day was like a knife. I remembered all of them. Every single one. Too busy with Marcus's football, Gran continued. Can't afford the train right now. Work is overwhelming. Always an excuse. Meanwhile, you were taking Marcus on holiday to Spain. To France. You bought him a car for his 17th birthday. You never even sent Dana a card. She set down the notebook and looked back at the camera. I have 15 years of documentation. Phone records, emails, text messages you sent me complaining about having to maintain a relationship with that girl. Yes, Sarah, you called your daughter that girl. My mother had gone gray. Gran turned her attention to my father. Robert, you're no better. You told me once, after a few drinks at Christmas, you probably don't even remember, that having Dana was a mistake that wouldn't go away. You said you'd wanted to stop at one child, but Sarah got pregnant accidentally, and you've resented Dana ever since. My father looked like he might be sick. You called her stubborn, difficult, a burden. You told me she was lucky I was willing to take her off your hands. Those were your exact words, Robert. Lucky you'll take her off our hands. The video showed Gran leaning forward, and her expression was steel. I documented everything. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I knew this day would come. I knew you'd try to paint Dana as manipulative, paint me as senile or confused. So I made sure the truth was irrefutable. She held up several folders. Medical records proving my sound mind. Financial records showing I built this wealth over 40 years, long before Dana came to live with me. Witness statements from neighbors, from Dana's teachers, from my own friends, all documenting your neglect. Try to challenge this, Will, if you want. You'll lose, and every ugly truth will become public record. Aunt Linda was crying. Uncle James looked furious but defeated. Marcus just sat there, staring at the screen like he'd never seen his parents before. But Gran wasn't done. Her expression softened, and she looked into the camera with so much love it broke my heart all over again. But this video isn't really for them, Dana. It's for you. I felt fresh tears spilling down my face. There's something else you need to know. Something about your real family. I've kept this secret because I wanted to make sure everything was in place first, that you'd be protected and provided for before the truth came out. She took a breath, and I saw her hands trembling slightly. You deserve to know where you really come from, who you really are. Mr. Peterson will explain after this recording ends. The screen went dark. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then I found my voice, barely above a whisper. What did she mean, my real family? Mr. Peterson paused the video and turned to face me. The room was chaos. My mother trying to storm out, my father shouting something about defamation, Aunt Linda sobbing into Uncle James's shoulder. Marcus just sat there, silent and shell-shocked. Dana, Mr. Peterson said gently, would you like privacy for this part? I looked at my mother, frozen in the doorway. At my father, red-faced and furious. At the family that had spent 23 years making me feel like I didn't belong. No, I said. Everyone's already heard everything else. Mr. Peterson nodded and pulled out another sealed envelope. His hands were steady, professional, but his eyes held something like compassion. Your grandmother wanted me to give you this information personally, but she also prepared documentation. He handed me the envelope. When you were 8 years old, the reason your parents couldn't handle you wasn't just the dyslexia. The room went very quiet. Even my mother stopped at the door. Your mother had just discovered that your father had an affair 7 years earlier, before Marcus was born. And she suspected, but was never certain, that you weren't Robert's biological daughter. The floor tilted. I gripped the edge of my chair, my knuckles white. Eleanor had a DNA test done, Mr. Peterson continued. With your permission, of course. She collected a sample from a hairbrush during one of your visits and had it compared to Robert's DNA, which she obtained from a glass he used at Christmas. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Dana, you're not biologically Robert's daughter. The words hung in the air like smoke. Your biological father is a man named James Morrison. He was Sarah's colleague at the time. Eleanor tracked him down 3 years ago. 3 years. Gran had known for 3 years and never said anything. Where is he? My voice sounded strange, distant. Edinburgh. He's a teacher. Married, with 2 children, your half-siblings. He never knew Sarah was pregnant. He never knew you existed. I stared at the envelope in my hands. Inside was a letter. From a man I'd never met. My father. My real father. He's known about you for 3 years, Mr. Peterson said softly. He wanted to reach out, but Eleanor advised waiting until after, well, until now. Until you were free of them. He gestured toward my parents. Everything made sense now. The resentment, the disgust. My mother's hatred wasn't about me being difficult or having dyslexia. I was living proof of her affair. And my father, Robert, he'd looked at me my entire life and seen his wife's betrayal. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd punished me for existing. Mom. Marcus's voice cut through my thoughts. You knew. I looked up. My brother was standing now, staring at our mother with an expression I'd never seen before. Betrayal. Disgust. You knew she wasn't Dad's daughter and you never said anything. Shut up, Marcus. My mother's face was a mask of fury and shame. This is none of your... I'm your son, Marcus shouted, and I realized I'd never heard him raise his voice at her before. Ever. Dana's my sister. Was my sister? I don't even... How could you do this to her? She was a mistake. My mother's scream echoed off the walls. She was crying now, completely losing control. I got pregnant by someone else and ruined everything. Your father wanted to leave me. I had to convince him to stay, to give us another chance. And then there she was. She pointed at me like I was something contaminated, living proof of what I'd done, and I couldn't. She was sobbing, real tears mixed with rage and shame and 23 years of buried resentment. And I understood, finally. She'd never hated me. She'd hated herself, and she'd made me pay for it every day of my life. I looked down at the envelope, opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, handwritten on simple line paper. The handwriting was neat, careful. Dear Dana, I don't know how to begin this letter except to say I'm so sorry. I never knew about you. If I had, everything would have been different. Your grandmother contacted me 3 years ago. When she told me about you, about your life, what you've endured, it broke my heart. You deserved so much better. My wife, Catherine, knows everything. When your grandmother contacted me, I told her immediately. We have 2 children, Emma, 16, and Oliver, 13, and we've told them about you. They're excited to meet their older sister if you're willing. I know this is overwhelming. I know I'm a stranger, but I want you to know you're not unwanted. You never were. I would have loved to be your father if I'd been given the chance. Please call me when you're ready. No pressure, no expectations. Just whenever you're ready. James Morrison. At the bottom was a phone number and an address in Edinburgh. And below that, in Grant's handwriting, one final note. Dana, you have 2 half-siblings who've known about you for a year, and they can't wait to finally have a sister. You were never unwanted, sweetheart. You were just with the wrong family. I looked up at Mr. Peterson through my tears. She arranged all of this. He nodded. She wanted to make sure you had somewhere to go. People who actually wanted you. She didn't want you to feel alone. I wasn't alone. I had a father who'd written me a letter full of kindness. Siblings who were excited to meet me. A family I'd never known existed. And £8.7 million to build whatever life I wanted. I stood up, folding the letter carefully and putting it in my bag. I'm leaving now, I said. Mr. Peterson, please send me all the relevant paperwork for the estate. I'll review it with my own lawyer. Of course, he said, standing as well. I walked toward the door. My mother tried to grab my arm. Dana, wait. We need to talk about this. We need to. No, I said, pulling away. We don't. We're done. You can't just. I can. And I am. I looked at Marcus. He was watching me with something like awe. If you want to talk, I said, you have my number. But I'm done with them. And then I walked out of Peterson and Associates, leaving my old family behind. 3 weeks later, I was on a train to Edinburgh, watching the countryside blur past my window. The letter from James Morrison was in my pocket, folded and refolded, so many times the creases were starting to wear thin. I'd read it every day since the will reading, sometimes twice a day, trying to imagine the man who'd written it, trying to picture what it would be like to meet him. The last 3 weeks had been surreal. Mr. Peterson had sent over boxes of documentation about Grant's properties. I'd hired my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Claire who'd reviewed everything and confirmed it was all legitimate, all mine. The property portfolio alone was generating £40,000 a month in rental income. The investments were sound, diversified, carefully managed. Grant had built an empire in silence, and left it all to me. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Did you make it to Edinburgh okay?" We'd been texting, carefully. Monthly coffee, we'd agreed. But he'd checked in a few times since the will reading, and I found myself actually responding. "Just arriving," I typed back. "Nervous." "You'll be great. They already love you." I hoped he was right. The train pulled into Edinburgh Waverley, and my stomach was in knots. What if they didn't like me? What if this was just curiosity, not real connection? What if I was hoping for something that couldn't exist? I stepped onto the platform, scanning the crowd. And then I saw him. James Morrison stood near the ticket barrier, holding a handwritten sign that said Dana, with a smiley face drawn next to it. He was tall. I'd inherited his height, with dark hair going gray at the temples and kind eyes that looked exactly like mine. The same green-gold color I'd always wondered about, since neither Sarah nor Robert had them. Beside him was a teenage girl who could only be Emma, practically bouncing with excitement, and a younger boy, Oliver, looking shy but curious. Behind them, a woman with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Catherine. James saw me, and his face broke into this enormous smile. Not polite, not forced, genuinely happy. I walked toward them on shaky legs. Emma couldn't wait. She rushed forward and threw her arms around me before anyone could say a word. "Oh my God, you're real. You're actually here. I've wanted a sister my whole life." I laughed, startled, hugging her back. She smelled like vanilla and teenage enthusiasm. Oliver hung back but gave me a small wave and a genuine smile. And James's eyes were filled with tears as he pulled me into a hug. "Welcome home, Dana," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know this isn't really home yet, but I hope it will be someday." Catherine stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "We're so glad you came." They took me to their house, a beautiful Victorian terrace in Stockbridge with a garden in the back and bookshelves lining every wall. Catherine made lunch while Emma talked nonstop about school and friends and how excited she was to introduce me to everyone. Oliver showed me his comic book collection and asked if I liked Marvel movies. We sat around the kitchen table, and it felt like family. Not the tense, silent dinners I remembered from childhood, where every word was weighted and dangerous. This was easy, warm. James asked about my life, my job at the library, my dreams. Catherine wanted to know if I'd visited Edinburgh before. Oliver asked if I wanted to see his school's comic book club sometime. And Emma kept looking at me like I was the best present she'd ever received. "I always wanted a sister," she said for the third time. "Ollie's great, but he's a boy. You know." "I know," I said, and realized I was smiling. Really smiling. After lunch, James showed me photos. His wedding to Catherine. Emma as a baby. Oliver learning to walk. A whole life I'd never been part of. "I wish I'd known," he said quietly while Catherine cleared dishes and the kids argued about what movie to watch. "About you, I mean. I would have been there. I would have fought for you." "I know," I said. And I did. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he looked at his children. This was a man who showed up, who cared. "Your grandmother," he said. "Eleanor. She was remarkable. She tracked me down, explained everything, and gave me time to process. She made sure I understood what you'd been through, what you deserved. She was the best person I've ever known," I said, and my voice cracked. "She loved you so much," James said. That came through in every conversation. You were her whole world. We spent the afternoon walking through the botanic gardens, Emma chattering away while Oliver pointed out different plants. Catherine walked beside me, asking gentle questions about my life, my work, my hopes. "I'm sorry," she said at one point, "for what you went through, what they did to you." "It wasn't your fault," I said. "No, but you deserved better. And I want you to know we're here now, for whatever you need. Family doesn't have to be complicated." By evening, I was exhausted but happy. Happier than I'd been in months. Maybe years. James drove me back to my hotel, Emma insisting on coming along. "You'll come back, right?" Emma asked as we pulled up. "Like, this isn't just a one-time thing." "I'll come back," I promised. "Good." She hugged me again. "Because you're my sister now. And I don't let go of people I love." I was crying as I walked into the hotel lobby. Happy tears. For the first time in my life, happy tears. My phone buzzed as I was getting ready for bed. Marcus, I need to talk to you. About Mom and Dad. About everything. Please. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I texted back an address. A cafe near my hotel. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Marcus was already at the cafe when I arrived, hunched over a cup of coffee that looked like it had gone cold. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. His hair unkempt, wearing a wrinkled shirt I'd seen him wear to the Will reading. The golden child who'd always had everything suddenly looked lost. He stood when he saw me, and for a moment we just stared at each other. I didn't know, he said immediately, before I'd even sat down. About Dad, Robert, not being your father. About them dumping you with Grandma like that. I mean, I knew you lived with her, but they told me it was because you wanted to. Because you and Grandma were close. I sat down, ordering tea from the hovering waitress. When she left, I looked at my brother, half-brother, properly. I was 5 when you went to live with Grandma, Marcus continued, his words tumbling out. I barely remember you being at home before that. And then as I got older, Mom and Dad they made it seem like you were difficult. That you'd chosen Grandma over us. That you were bitter and jealous of me. He was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I believed them, Dana. I'm so sorry. I believed them, and I never questioned it. I was a complete shit to you, and you didn't deserve any of it. No, I agreed quietly. I didn't. But you were a kid, Marcus. They manipulated you too. I'm 23 years old, he said, voice rising. I should have questioned it. Should have visited Grandma more, talked to you more, actually gave a damn. But it was easier not to. Easier to just be the golden child and pretend everything was fine. The waitress brought my tea. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, gathering my thoughts. What's happened since the Will reading? I asked. Marcus laughed bitterly. Everything's fallen apart. Mom and Dad are barely speaking. Dad, Robert, moved out to a hotel because Mom kept screaming at him about ruining everything. The extended family has taken sides. Some people think you manipulated Grandma. Some think Mom and Dad got what they deserved. He took a breath. But the worst part? Someone leaked Grandma's video testimony online. Probably Aunt Linda, trying to get sympathy, but it backfired. It went viral. Everyone knows now. Everyone knows what they did to you. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just emptiness. Mom's become a pariah, Marcus continued. Her friends won't talk to her. People she's known for years have cut her off. And Dad's talking about divorce because he can't stand the humiliation. Good, I said flatly. Marcus flinched but nodded. I don't blame you. He took a breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. And that if you ever want a relationship with me, a real one, I'd really like that. But I understand if you don't. I studied him. The golden child who'd been used as a weapon against me for years, but who was also a victim of our parents' dysfunction. I met my biological father yesterday, I said. And my half-siblings. Marcus's face crumpled. That's good. You deserve that. They asked about you, I admitted. Catherine, James's wife. She said that just because my mother was awful doesn't mean you have to lose your sister. That family is complicated and messy, but it's worth fighting for if the people are genuine. I met his eyes. Are you genuine, Marcus? Because I can't do this if you're going to run back to Mom and Dad and feed them information. Or try to guilt me into sharing the inheritance. I don't want the inheritance, Marcus said firmly. I mean it. I want my sister back. The one I barely knew but should have protected. I can't undo the past, Dana. But I want to try for the future. I made a decision. Okay, but we do this slowly. Coffee once a month. We get to know each other like adults, not as the roles Mom and Dad forced us into. And if you prove you're trustworthy, maybe someday we can actually be family. Marcus's relief was palpable. I'll take it. Thank you. Thank you. We talked for another hour. He told me about his life, his job. His girlfriend, who'd broken up with him after seeing the video, said she couldn't be with someone from a family like that. I told him about the properties, the charity Gran wanted me to establish, my plans to quit my job at the library and do something meaningful. When we parted, he hugged me. A real hug, not the awkward half-embraces we'd exchanged at family gatherings. I'll be better, he promised. I'll prove it. Okay, I said. I believe you. 6 months later, I stood in the bright, open space that would become the Eleanor Hartley Center for Learning, watching contractors put the finishing touches on the reading room. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in natural light, comfortable chairs in cheerful colors, bookshelves waiting to be filled, computer stations with specialized software for kids with learning disabilities. Everything Gran would have loved. James and Catherine were flying down for the opening next week, bringing Emma and Oliver. Marcus had been here yesterday, helping me paint one of the smaller classrooms. Mr. Peterson had agreed to serve on the board of directors, along with Claire, my lawyer, and a professor of education from the local university. I walked through the main hall, trailing my fingers along the wall where a plaque would hang. The Eleanor Hartley Center for Learning, because every child deserves a champion. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Please call me. We need to talk. I deleted it without responding. She'd been trying for months. Emails, texts, letters to my new address, which she'd somehow obtained. I'd blocked her number twice, but she kept finding new ways to reach me. I was done. Mr. Peterson's lawyers had shut down every challenge to the will. My parents had tried. Oh, how they'd tried. But Gran's documentation was ironclad. They'd hired 3 different lawyers, all of whom eventually told them the same thing. You'll lose, and it'll cost you everything. Eventually, they'd given up. Marcus told me they were getting divorced. Robert had moved to Manchester. Sarah was living alone in the house Gran had left them, the house worth £1.2 million that felt like a consolation prize now. I felt nothing about it. They were strangers to me now. Less than strangers. The door opened, and Marcus walked in carrying coffee and a bag of pastries. Thought you might need fuel, he said, grinning. We'd kept our word. Coffee once a month had become twice a month, then weekly. We'd spent the last 6 months actually getting to know each other, and I discovered my brother was funny, thoughtful, and deeply ashamed of who he'd been before. He was trying, really trying. Emma texted me, he said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside me. She wants to know if I'm coming to the opening. Are you? If that's okay, I'd like to meet them. Your other family. You're my family too, I said. He smiled, and it was genuine. Yeah, I am. We sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and eating pastries while imagining the children who'd fill the space. Kids like I'd been, struggling, scared, thinking they were broken. They'd learn they weren't, that they were brilliant and capable and worthy. Just like Gran had taught me. I thought about her letter, about the $10 that everyone had laughed at, the $10 that had never been an insult, but a gift, the gift of truth. She'd show me exactly who my parents were, and in doing so, she'd set me free. Free to find my real family, free to build something meaningful, free to finally believe that I deserved love. Marcus nudged my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I said and realized I meant it. I really am. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who fights for you, who loves you not despite your flaws but because of who you are. Gran showed up for 15 years. James and Catherine showed up the moment they knew I existed. Marcus was showing up now, trying to be the brother he should have been all along. And my parents, they'd shown exactly who they were. I was just finally listening.